All right. Well, it is day 81, I think, of the Montana legislature at this point, if my math is correct. And it sounds like they're going to be going till Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. That they're going to sine die somewhere around then. There's some hearings scheduled Monday and Tuesday. That doesn't mean they'll actually have those hearings, but I think that they're getting close. They haven't quite finished the property tax issue, and they're still haggling over the budget, which they cannot leave until they actually adopt the budget. That is a constitutionally required, really the only constitutionally required thing that the legislature has to do. So I would expect Wednesday, probably at the latest, they're going to be done here in Helena, which takes us out to roughly day 86, 87 of the Montana legislature. And as I mentioned before, it's they're probably coming back, I would say, in the fall for a special session. If I had to guess, there's going to be a lot of federal money missing from the picture that's going to have to be accounted for somehow. And so they're probably going to have to reconvene and do some tweaks to the budget, etc. So that's something that we're anticipating. But there's two things happening today. First, I'm gonna hand it off to Kearstyn and Natalie with Montana Conservation Voters, and then we're gonna run through a rapid fire list of bills once they're wrapped up. But let's first go to MCV. Natalie and Kearstyn have graced us with their presence. They are awesome. They have been extremely helpful this whole legislative session in running what we call the Conservation Working Group. Many of you have heard about it. And of course, they help to herd the cats up in the Capitol and produce green sheets and get information out to legislators. And they've been great partners. So we've asked for them to come today and talk about something they've been working on that MEIC doesn't, that a lot of our members have an interest in, which is the Habitat Montana Fund and the marijuana money. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Kearstyn and Natalie to take over and give us the landscape on where things are at.
Sure thing. Thanks. Let's see if I can, because we made some slides for this too. Just pull those up. Okay. It's giving me settings problems, but while we're pulling that up, I'll just say a little bit about what we do as Montana conservation voters. So like Durf said, we convene the conservation working group with a bunch of conservation oriented organizations. MEIC, fantastic partners. We work with them on a lot of the MEPA bills that we dealt with this session and a lot of the clean air, clean water stuff. But we do, as Montana conservation voters, our mission also encompasses democracy. So we work on elections bills, protecting free and fair elections, and judiciary stuff like stopping the partisan judicial bills from getting through. And like Durf said, a lot of marijuana. Recording in progress.
Yeah, I was going to try to pull it up.
So my computer's not letting me pull up the slides that we made. Okay.
I'm just gonna keep that close.
Kearstyn's laptop is possessed. Sorry about that. We can send the link to you, Katie, if you can pull it up for us, because apparently I don't have screen sharing settings enabled on my computer, which I'm just now finding out.
I also made Kearstyn co-host too, so if she wants to try, but I'm absolutely happy to pull a link up too.
I think you need to make sure you mute if I'm
okay.
Got it.
Wonderful. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So sorry about the technical difficulties, but we'll get right into it. So Montana conservation voters, our mission statement, clean air, clean water, public lands. We do a lot of public lands access work, and that ties into a lot of our work on marijuana revenue bills, because as it stands right now, there's a significant percentage of that that goes to Habitat Montana and state parks, trails, non-game wildlife, things of that nature. And that funding has been the focus of a lot of controversy, because there are many in the legislature who believe that there should be a more like a better nexus with the marijuana money and where it's going. Essentially, they think it should go to treatment programs, which is all well and good, but they are trying to take all of the money away from the current allocations to conservation programs. So I think we can go to the next slide, get right into the nitty-gritty of it a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm sure many people on this call are already aware of the ongoing battle for conservation funding. But basically in 2021, 20% of recreational marijuana tax revenue was allocated to Habitat Montana, 4% for non-game wildlife, 4% for state parks, 4% for trails. And voters passed this marijuana legalization initiative on the ballot the year prior, with the understanding that about a third of the tax revenue would go toward conservation, would go toward these purposes. So that was codified in the legislature in 2021, but it has seen endless attacks ever since. So in 2023, there was a big battle trying to strip that money away from conservation purposes. Some of you might remember SB 442. There was a huge battle to get that across the finish line. It was ultimately vetoed. That was a more proactive effort, but there are also like several defensive several bills that we've had to play defense against. So in 2023 and again in 2025, probably the biggest threat this year was SB 307 that was sponsored by Senator Tom McGilvery. And that proposed, like Natalie said, putting that money more toward drug treatment, drug prevention, and stripping all of the money away from conservation programs. So if it had passed, it would have stripped about $21 million from Habitat Montana over the next 2 years, and then another almost $13 million from the other 3 conservation accounts. So would have been a drastic change. That bill, thank goodness, died.
Yeah. And it's tough messaging on that sort of thing, because the argument that, you know, marijuana revenue should be funneled into drug prevention and treatment programs, like that's a pretty good argument. And it honestly, there is a good relation to that more than, say, conservation funding and non-game wildlife, right? But this is where we have to get our money from. There's not really room to take it out of FWP budget elsewhere. So it's like, if we're not getting the money from the marijuana revenue, we're just losing a substantial amount of funding. And it's very hard to get people to side with us on this sort of bill when there's such a powerful argument for putting the money towards drug treatment and drug prevention. And that it was, you know, quite difficult to kill this bill because that is such a popular and compelling narrative. But it is no longer alive. And there are a couple bills, we can go to the next slide, Katie, if you don't mind, that are still alive in the legislature that are positive in terms of safeguarding the money that the Habitat Montana programs and conservation programs already receive, and clarifying it a little bit more to give us a better framework in the future for defending, honestly, the funding sources instead of saying, okay, well, just 20% goes to Habitat Montana. That's a pretty easy thing to then start picking apart. But if you designate it more specifically, it's a little bit harder to attack in future legislative sessions.
Yeah, yep. So just like SB 442, there are 2 proactive bills this session that are still alive. So that's SB 537 and HB 932. Both of these bills propose creating the Habitat Legacy account. And so just like Natalie said, currently, we just have this huge chunk of money, 20% going toward Habitat Montana, and that's just subject to consistent attacks year after year. So the idea is that if we can put more of a framework in place, more programs in place, it's harder to keep attacking this conservation funding. Could you go to the next slide, please, Katie? Thank you for doing tech for us.
Yes, apologies.
So here is a graph that's been circulating around a lot this session. So basically, if you focus in on that middle teal square, that Habitat Legacy account, this is the new proposal that is being put forward in both SB 537 and HB 932. So currently 20% goes to Habitat Montana. With this Habitat Legacy account, that money will be split into different different funds. So one is the Land and Wildlife Stewardship Fund, that's laws. So a lot of like the Habitat Montana money will come out of there. A newer one is the Legacy Wildlife Habitat Improvement Projects Fund, or WIP. The governor's office is actually very amenable to this fund. And so putting that in there also kind of helps ensure that that maybe this funding will be a little safer moving forward. And also a brand new account is our Big Game Wildlife Crossing Projects Fund. And so that is, it's overpasses, but it could also be fences. It's less so crossings and more so accommodations, because ultimately Montana is second in the nation for wildlife collisions. And so this account has broad support. Yeah, so HB 932, SB 537, both propose this Habitat Legacy account. There is a difference between the 2 bills. HB 932 pretty much just focuses on the Habitat Legacy account, generally speaking, whereas SB 537 actually takes all of the marijuana tax revenue and completely disperses of it differently. So currently about 32% of marijuana tax revenue goes toward conservation, and then like 65% goes to the state's general fund. SB 537 slashes that funding for the general fund and instead puts that money toward law enforcement support. We're calling this the Cops and Conservation Bill. So funding for drug detection canines, sexual assault forensic services, and more locally focused law enforcement grants. It also provides support for homelessness. So it adds case management services to programs that are funded under the Heart Fund. And then it also does some of that public health investment. So strengthening Montana's behavioral health system, funding cannabis enforcement efforts, supporting substance use prevention programs. So basically this bill is kind of like an SB 442 remake, and it's just everyone gets something, everyone's happy, except the governor.
except the governor. And the strategy behind these bills has been pretty interesting because from a conservation perspective, they do essentially the same thing, but we are interested in keeping both of them alive because the fear with 537, and like Kearstyn says, it gives money to a lot of different things. It just keeps the conservation money the same. So that's not even really the focal point of most of the discussions around this bill. A lot of it has to do with the new money that it's giving to law enforcement, and more specifically, the money that it's taking away from the governor's general fund. And lest we forget, the governor still has the power of the veto, and it's been pretty much dangled over our heads that should SB 537 pass, the governor will veto it because it takes all of his money. Now, the sponsor is pretty confident that he has a veto override majority, but we saw how that went down with SB 442, and it can be kind of a logistical nightmare, and people sometimes just don't care to overturn the will of the governor. But it does have quite popular support from a lot of the left, meaning mostly the Democratic Party, and a lot of the far right, who are really interested in supporting their community's law enforcement, where the more centrist people are more aligned with the governor and not interested in supporting it because it takes away all of that general fund money. And by having this somewhat more threatening bill still floating out there, the less threatening bill to the governor, which is HB 932, the one that only touches the habitat money, has a better shot of really making it into law.
Yeah, that was great.
Cool. Anything else to add?
No, I don't think so. That's pretty much the state of conservation funding, marijuana tax revenue currently. It's been really amazing to see the coalitions forming around these bills, honestly. I think it just goes to show that conservation can still be a bipartisan issue, which is just really
a foreign concept.
Yeah, it's really refreshing. And yeah, we have probably less than a week left. So
yeah,
who knows what'll happen. Every day is just so dynamic. Everything's constantly changing.
Yeah.
Amendments everywhere.
There's all these deals being made, but both of these bills are still alive. And we sort of at this point anticipate, because they only have got each one more vote in a chamber, they'll have to go back for concurrence on some amendments, but it seems like they're both going to make it to the governor's desk. It's just what happens after that we really are not quite sure about. But conservation funding lives to see another day.
Yeah.
And that's it.
And that's conservation funding.
And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Does anyone have questions for Natalie and Kearstyn? All right. Thank you so much for that information, y'all.
Yeah,
Really
thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much for having us.
Thank you. That's fantastic that both of those bills are going to make it to the governor's desk. So nice job. Good work. Okay. I'm instructing myself as well as everybody else that's going to talk to keep this short because we only have a little bit of time, and I want to have some time for Q&A with our members this afternoon. A lot of these bills are just sort of towards the end of their life, whether they've been vetoed or they're at the governor's desk. So we're really at the tail end of the session. And it's going to be a little bit of a rundown today. That's okay. So these are all good bills, I believe, that have passed one way or another with MEIC's and our members' work. The interim study on energy transmission, the phrase is that, you can't have transition without transmission is very real in Montana. We are a transmission short state in that we need more in order to build up our clean energy resources in Montana. So we've been focusing a lot in this session on transmission related legislation and resolutions and education, and have passed both Senate Joint 12 as well as Senate Joint 21, which is another interim study looking at both in-state as well as out-of-state transmission construction opportunities so that we can build out that grid, make more resources available basically, and move energy in a more seamless and broader fashion across the West. So that's exciting. Joint resolution to study transportation, Laura, real quick.
So this one was, yeah, a study resolution to explore ways to improve all modes of transportation for the Montana public, especially senior citizens, tourists, people with disabilities. It's gonna, focus on public transit and the passenger rail, but it's gonna look at all forms of transportation. So it's awesome that that one has passed.
All right. And then we have HB 760. This is kind of like you have some shady operators in every business, and unfortunately, there are some in the solar business that are being unscrupulous in terms of their contracts, etc. And this is creating some consumer protection laws for solar businesses that are going door to door and trying to rip people off. So that's a good bill that we supported. That has now moved on to the governor or already been signed. HB 55. This is actually a bill that came out of an interim energy working group. It started out sort of problematic, but at this point has become a good bill in that it allows or requires more engagement from the public, which is something that we are always in support of in terms of trying to get more Montana voices into the room. So we worked hard to get the amendments on there, and that's a good bill. And SB 301, this is actually a pre-approval bill, pre-approval being basically allowing for the utility to give them some predetermined assumptions about whether or not they're going to get their costs back that they invest. We're generally skeptical of pre-approval when it comes to a lot of things, but this is a pre-approval for transmission, and there are a number of sideboards on it that allow for us to be able to support something like this. So this is going to hopefully grease the skids a little bit for more transmission projects in Montana and do so in a way that protects Montana consumers. I think we have another victory slide.
We do, but we have a question in the chat from Janice, who wants to know, how does one track the progress of these in the victory category? And I'm curious, Janice, are you asking about like on our website, on our bill tracker, or you're welcome to come off mute if you.
When legislature is finished and these are on the shelf, how do we find out what the study groups are doing and what their scope of work is?
Well, that is a very good point, Janice. And I think that it's one thing to pass a bill, which basically directs them to have the opportunity to do the study. That doesn't mean that the study will be done or will be done well. And so that would be the next step in the process and something that we will be engaging in. But for now, passing this bill dedicates some resources, hopefully, towards basically legislative services and the committees that are responsible for these interim studies to take a look at it. And I do think we'll get some good stuff out of these interim committees, but not without some, some follow-up and some follow-through. That's the thing about these study bills is once you get them over the line, you're basically committing yourself to 2 years of work.
But reports will come out. I mean, we'll be able to.
Yeah. Well,
I'm a former electric utility employee, so I'm sensitive to this stuff.
yeah, no, and usually they do. It just depends on the committee's workload as well. Study bills are often, sort of an opportunity for everybody to support everything. But when the committee gets together, they're like, okay, we're not going to do 100 studies over the next 2 years. So they rank and prioritize what they're going to look at. Because there's been so much interest in transmission, I think the Energy Committee is really going to dig into it. But some of these bills, even though the legislation has passed on some of these resolutions, may not actually move forward in the committee.
Thank you.
Yep.
And after the 2023 session, MEIC did a webinar all about legislative interim committees. What do legislators do when they're not in session? And so I can't guarantee we would do something similar, but I don't see why we wouldn't either. So we are watching and paying attention and trying to communicate to you all what's happening in those meetings. Gary wants to know if these meetings are open to the public, Durf.
Absolutely. The same as every type of legislative meeting. They are something with notice and comment. And so you can go and speak your mind and submit information, etc. And we encourage people to do so. And for our issue, we'll certainly engage you.
All right,
And
a few more victories.
Laura.
Another fantastic transportation bill. This one allows for county commissioners to initiate the process of expanding the urban transportation districts. That wasn't a thing before. It also allows expansion of those districts if funding is provided.
And
And another traffic and transportation bill has made it through. So this is reducing the amount of minimum parking requirements that cities can require for housing development. So this is going to free up more space for denser housing and hopefully over time allow more transportation options to take the place of parking.
all right. And I'm gonna be a little bit out of my element on some of these things because both Ben and Nicholas are in committees right now dealing with legislation, and so I'm a little bit well, I just don't know as much of them on some of these bills. So on this farmers markets bill, again, what we're looking at here is trying to have a more secure food system and a local food system, and hopefully the interim agricultural committee will adopt this. It was really popular. People love being able to shop locally when they can. So that got across the finish line. And SB 436.
Seems to be dead. We were concerned about this one, but we're pretty confident that that one is going to stay where it's at and not come back. So that's great.
Yep.
Great. And then we're gonna
Right.
try to go through, we have a bunch of slides, but we're trying to go through them quick in case you all have questions.
Yep. So even though we are getting to the end of the legislature, our work is not done. Once a bill hits the governor's desk, he has 10 days to make a decision. If he doesn't make a decision after 10 days, it just becomes law. Usually he will either sign it or veto it. He also has the opportunity for what's called an amendatory veto. I don't believe we're asking for the governor to do amendatory vetoes in any of this legislation. I think the vast majority of these, we're just asking for straight up vetoes. So we have three bad water bills. The first one is the material damage bill, which I'm sure you are all familiar with, dealing with water quality and quantity outside of coal mine permit boundaries. Bad bill. HB 664, which is the repeal of the numeric nutrient standard in Montana without any proposal for a replacement in order to assure we're protecting water quality. And then HB 685, which renames the Montana's non-degradation policy into a feasibility allowance and prohibits the DEQ from fully considering the environmental and social impacts of pollution, and narrows it so that where they're just having to look at the benefits associated with pollution, which is a problematic bill. All of these are now at the governor's desk or soon to be. They're in like the administrative process beforehand. And so I would encourage you to reach out on each one of these. And there's more information on our website. I had a lot of fun trying to kill this coal washing tax credit bill because it is a very bad bill that basically gives millions of dollars a year to a company that's making hundreds of millions of dollars a year already. Unfortunately, it was resurrected earlier this week and is heading to the governor. This is a bill that could be vetoed, and it would make a lot of sense to veto this bill. It doesn't make sense for Montana to be subsidizing very wealthy international corporations who are making a lot of money off of exporting coal. So we would like to see this go away. This bill would extend it for another 2 years. And it's an easy ask for him to veto it at this point.
Particularly of note for folks in Yellowstone and Muscle counties, because this would take away tons of tax revenue from those counties and give a tax break to a company that absolutely does not deserve it.
Absolutely. Okay. And PFAS and plastic pollution. I would never have thought, but this is a fantastic step forward, is a bill that has made it to the governor's desk to phase out styrofoam in Montana. And Ben worked really hard on this, as well as Natalie. It is now in front of the governor, and there is absolutely no sure sign whether or not he's going to sign this. So we need a lot of people to reach out to the governor and say, this is something I want to see happen. It's good for Montana. It's good for businesses. It's good for the environment. So that's towards the top of our list. It's a fantastic sort of step forward in managing pollution. And then HJ 44, which is an interesting piece of legislation that's encouraging us to investigate and analyze endocrine disrupting chemicals in the water supply. There's a lot of information out there already, so I'm assuming this is trying to get a little bit more specific about what Montanans are exposed to. But it is, I think, probably going to be, well, the timeline is getting really tight and it's only passed the House, hasn't passed the, just being considered in the Senate. So it's going to be very nip and tuck, whether it actually makes it through the full process, but also a good bill and surprising to see it moving forward in this legislature.
We talked about both of these. I'll just reiterate, it's good to be in land use right now. I actually got to delete my opposed slide, so in a really good position. I don't have thank you. Yeah, not much more to say. Good bills.
Okay, expensive and unreliable nuclear energy. Unfortunately, one bill for waste and one bill on the front end dealing with processing and enrichment of uranium. They've both passed and are now at the governor's desk. We had worked on trying to get these bills amended. They were amended at one point, but unfortunately, both of these are now in front of the governor, and we would ask for a veto because of their the enormous costs associated with nuclear energy, especially because these bills don't have any sort of limit as to where we might accept nuclear waste from, which could potentially be worldwide, or at least North American wide, as well as the impacts to the health of people, in particular Native Americans and people of color, because often these uranium mines and sites are sited in places where there's some serious environmental justice concerns, which was really the substance of our amendments we were trying to get on it. So both of these are big vetoes that we're asking for at this point. And this one is why Ben is not here. This is in Senate Energy being considered right now. And I don't have information on whether or not this is going to, it sounds like it may die in Senate Energy. They could be voting on it this very second, or it may pass, in which case it's something that we want to support on the Senate floor. They are going to vote today, so I don't think you're going to have time to reach out to Senate Energy this second. So I would look up HJ 46 in the bill tracker or on our website. And if it does pass, encourage you all to reach out to your senator and get ready for that Senate floor vote. But basically data centers are huge energy pigs. And so if we're gonna allow for data centers to be sited in Montana, there's a lot of considerations that go into it in terms of protecting the environment, our energy infrastructure, our consumers, etc. So that's something that needs to be considered before we permit this type of activity. All right, and then I believe that Nick is also, he might be on a different committee, but HB 911, this bill was tabled. This was the bill that allowed for Northwestern Energy to basically create a new shell corporation and bypass the normal Public Service Commission process in order to do things like create a merchant arm that sells energy to data centers, for example. This bill was tabled, and our understanding is it's going to stay tabled, but Senate Energy is meeting right now. So one to keep your eye on in case it does come off the table, in which case that's going to be a Senate floor vote that's probably going to happen by tomorrow. And then unfortunately, HB 490, and this is the bill that attempts or does release utilities and co-ops of liability if they act negligently when they're operating their system and cause wildfires, which we have plenty of examples across the country and even here in Montana with this problem. And so they should be responsible if and when they do act negligently, but this lets them off the hook. And so we're asking for veto of HB 490 from Governor Gianforte. All right, and I've already talked about HJ 46. So contact your senator on that one, only if it passes this afternoon. HB 939. This is a good wind siting bill that was sponsored by Katie Zolnikov. There were a lot of bad wind siting bills this session, and this one was carefully crafted to sort of find that sweet spot, the Goldilocks, not too close, not too far away kind of thing, to protect, adjacent property owners while still allowing for wind development. So this is now it was amended in the Senate, adjusted slightly. We support the amendments, and now it is in front of the House of Representatives, and we want to see it passed out of that body. So reach out to your House reps and encourage them to support it. And the big one, SB 188, this is the Solar Shares Act. This is community solar. It is now in front of the governor. No saying what he's going to do with it. There may be a mandatory veto. There may be a veto. There's a lot of pressure on him from the utility. They don't want to see this move forward. And so it would be a very good idea to reach out on this one, because that's a significant policy step forward for net metering and having clean energy right on your roof or on your business's roof.
And one messaging suggestion we have for that one is to say, he has an all of the above energy approach, which isn't necessarily our approach, but this is part of that. And so he should embrace solar and shared solar as part of his own all of the above energy approach.
Absolutely. It's about freedom. Okay, oppose. There's a bill that squeaked through that unfortunately just sort of by default gives utilities the right to install gas pipelines. Normally they'll have to go through a little bit more stringent permitting process with the local authority. This allows for them to bypass that and just install gas pipelines wherever they so choose, which are volatile and also something that we want to be getting away from. And so we're asking for a veto of HB 122. And then HJ 17. Resolutions, of course, do not go to the governor, but this is the catch-all. Let's get rid of all environmental laws on the books federally. It's really bad. It's interesting. It passed second reading today, like 90-10, and I was like, Democrats, what's going on? There was some amendments to it that they were concurring on the second reading vote, but I was told that they're all going to come back around on third reading, and there will be a strong opposition to it tomorrow. But I encourage you to reach out to whoever your House rep is and tell them to vote no on it. I think that once it passes the House, this basically becomes just a resolution, which isn't a big deal, but it certainly is not great for us to be saying to our congressional delegation that we want to, remove NEPA and the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act, et cetera, so that we can have this energy dominance agenda.
Dirk or Laura, could you speak to what a right of way means in terms of where it's located? Because I've gotten notices about fiber, fiber internet being installed in my neighborhood, and they can just dig up my front yard basically. And so I think talking a little bit about where these gas pipelines could go could be helpful.
Well, the right of way is a legal term for basically the place where both public and commerce can take place, that it may even be privately owned, but the public has an easement through which certain things can run. It's usually publicly owned space. So we're talking streets, alleys, anywhere where we've decided basically that there needs to be public access and public infrastructure considerations. And it's sort of a necessary thing when you're thinking about transmission and roads and whatnot. But when you're talking about something like gas, there's some special considerations that go into gas pipelines. Laura, do you have anything to add to that?
Nope. Often think of roads, think of, like Katie said, the space of your yard that they can come in and work on utilities. They just have to give you notice. Technically, it's a public space, like Dirk said.
And Gary says that highway right-of-ways are 60 feet on each side. Thank you, Gary. We learned something today.
Thank you.
All right, so I've already talked about SB 301. This is the good bill dealing with pre-approval for transmission projects. That's something that we would like to see signed. And so reach out to the governor. And then SB 355, increase competition for MDU in the building of transmission lines. Basically, this gets rid of the right of first refusal for MDU. It creates some additional competition in the marketplace by allowing other corporations to build transmission as merchant lines, to be able to get more energy online, which is almost certainly going to be clean energy. HJ 15 is another, I may have already talked about this. They're all sort of swimming around in my brain now, but all of these are related to either studying the opportunities for transmission or supporting increased transmission, HJ 15, 12, and 21, which we really support as an organization. Okay, and then HJ 12 is a resolution on EVs. This is riddled with inaccuracies and factually inaccurate statements about how EVs don't work in cold ever, et cetera, et cetera. It is in Senate Energy at this point. We're asking for people to oppose whether it stays in Senate Energy. I think they'll probably vote on it today, or if they get it out of Senate Energy, it'll be on the floor in the next day or two. So I would encourage you to reach out. Also, we're talking again about burning garbage for energy production, which is really 2025. Bad idea. Lots of chemicals that we're going to be pumping into the air. Not something that we need to be considering, whether it's through a study resolution or otherwise. So we're opposed to that. Laura, do you want to handle the next two?
We have two really good resolutions, both dealing with wildfire. HJ 61 is currently on the floor. This is a great bill, studying all possible factors leading to the rapid increase in property insurance premiums and the role of Montana's unique and extreme wildfire risk in those insurance rates. And one good thing about this bill is we will also have to acknowledge the causes behind the rise in wildfires in Montana. So the study committee will be talking about extreme weather events and with strong implications for climate. So that is a great bill for both housing affordability and climate acknowledgement. And then we have HJ 62, which is related but different, a study to explore statewide wildfire resilience strategies, mitigation efforts, so community level work that can be done to build resilience. And it is going to look at land use development patterns in the WUI, or the Wild Urban Land Interface, building materials, vegetation management, all that really important stuff. So that one did pass just earlier, so it's on its way to the Senate.
All right, I think we saved the worst for last. In my opinion, I hate these MEPA bills. There are 3 bad MEPA bills that are now in front of the governor's desk. In fact, all 4 are at the governor's desk at this point. And I suspect that there's going to be some sort of press event early next week in which he will do some major reforms of MEPA. We should not go quietly into the night, though. I think that we need to reach out to him and ask for a veto of the 3 bills at the top here, which, dramatically limit our ability to pursue the protection of our constitutional right to a clean, healthful environment. And they really tinker with a lot of the MEPA processes that are really important. That being said, there's things that they can't do that are unconstitutional, and we are watching this space really closely. And there is a good MEPA bill, which is HB 270. So if you are wanting to message a certain way to the governor about what he should do on MEPA, it would be to sign 270 and veto these other three. 270 provides certainty, clarifies what MEPA actually is under the Constitution, gets rid of unconstitutional language, whereas the other three are really wild cards and problematic for not just the public, but also people who are seeking permits, etc. Not something that we need to be considering. I'm pessimistic about the governor actually vetoing any of these. That being said, again, the legislative process is not where we always or even sometimes win. It's other places, it's other forums, it's rulemakings, it's in the court system. And there's a good chance that these very problematic bills will end up there. So all is not lost, but we still need to keep the pressure on for this little bit of time in the process. So we got the MEPA vetoes. We got the water quality vetoes. We got nuclear bills. And then, of course, we got the two good bills that we want to see signed into law. As these are some of our top priorities.
And just an added note from Nick, I think, if you contact the governor on SB 188, it's especially impactful if you're in a rural area. So the non-Missoulas, the non-Bobosmans, the non-Helenas. And then I don't think Nick is here, but we do have a brief rate case update. The hearing has been rescheduled for June 9th, and it'll run through June 20th. On June 9th, there will be public comment starting at 9 a.m. And then every day after that, it starts at 8 a.m. If you're looking for more information about how to get involved in public comment, please find Northern Plains and Sierra Club's many resources on how to get involved in the public comment. We're limited as we are interveners in the rate case. But if you have informational questions about it, well, maybe don't ask tonight because Ann and Nick are both not here. But I'm sure Durf would do a great job giving it a shot. We do have some more upcoming events. It is the middle of Billings Earth Week, sorry. It goes through the 27th. We'll have Denise in Billings at the Sustainable Vendor Fair on Saturday. So if you're in the area, go say hi to her and check out what I think is going to be a really fun event with lots of sustainable vendors. Oh, Janice, I'll go back to that slide in 1 second. Sorry about that. I went through too fast. And then there's also the Northwestern Energy Coalition Spring Clean and Affordable Energy Conference is in May this year, and MEIC is one of the sponsors. But Janice wants to see the timeline again for the rate case. I did go through that very quickly. So June 9th through 20th. Okay, great. Thanks, Janice. And I think that's it for us tonight. We got a few minutes for questions. Please feel free to come off mute or pop your questions in the chat. It's a good question, Gary. Durf, do you know if the rate cases are, rate case hearings will be in person? Is there also a Zoom option?
I am not sure whether you can testify remotely during the public comment period, Gary. That's a good question.
Oh, Shannon's here. Shannon might know.
I believe you can, but I'll have to double check on that and I can get back to you on that, Gary.
Yeah, let's double check on that. You definitely can watch. They have like an online link where you can watch the proceeding and you can testify in person during the public comment period, which I believe is in the morning. They'll have a public comment period every day.
And it's possible that it will end before the 20th. So if you would like to leave comment earlier, so.
Janice just asked about some of the proposals. Shannon, if you're able to pull up any PSC docs, I can also grab our website rate case page as well.
The fact sheet?
Yeah, let's share the fact sheet. That'll be the best way to answer some of these questions.
So here's our webpage on it, and we're very focused on the facts since we are interveners. And so if you're looking for, again, public comment guidance, please contact our Northern Plains and Sierra Club friends. Yes, thank you, Gary. Joanne, it's SB 188 that we're hoping to get especially rural folks to comment on. And then Gary also had another rate case question. If you sign up to comment, do you know you will be able to comment on a particular day?
I don't. We're gonna have to, I'm not sure they know either. And so I would think that we should make sure Nick is on the next Zoom and next week, and we clarify with the Public Service Commission what the opportunities are for public engagement. Whether it's, I assume it's going to be on a particular day, and they don't expect for you to show up every day until it's your turn. But we'll need to clarify that.
And that's a good point. We will have, assuming the legislature ends before or on Thursday next week, we'll have one more final wrap-up call, and then we'll take a hiatus on our weekly calls for a while, which it'll be sad to not see so many of you every week, but also our team is ready for a little break on those.
Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts? All right. Well,
Eric,
one
did you-
more next week, right, Katie? And then we're gonna call it for a while. But this has been fun.
Yeah, good to see all of you. All right. Thanks, everybody.